Hey everyone, welcome. Today I'm happy to have Kevin Indig with me here today to talk about SEO strategy. Kevin is a leading figure in the SEO industry. I've learned personally a lot from him. I've been following him for a while. He's also sending those amazing growth memo newsletters. He's also the ex-director of Shopify for SEO. And hi, welcome, Kevin.
Hey, thanks, Sara, for having me. Appreciate it.
Okay, so speaking of SEO strategy, where do we start?
Yeah, where do we start? I think there are two things or two thoughts that come up. One is that in SEO, we're typically in love with tactics and we're not paying a lot of attention to the strategy side. And then the second thing is that, we might have to define what strategy even is in the first place. And, there are kind of two different things that are often mixed up with each other. And one is strategy and the other one is planning. And strategy is basically the definition of, how you go to market or how you reach your customers in this case, how you do SEO, what your competitive advantages are, and how you plan to beat your competitors. And then the planning side of things is setting a goal within these parameters and having a plan for how to achieve that goal.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. So you mean we should start with business goals?
Yes, absolutely. I think typically you want to relate your goal to revenue and to how the business makes money. I think that's really what executives care about. Maybe market share on top of that. The biggest problem that I see is that SEO set goals that are too close to SEO or too close to organic traffic. Instead, you want to aim for business impact. How does that organic traffic matter? Where does it matter? And that's really the language that executives speak. And that's also the way to open the doors to more funding or more resources or more capacity, because opportunity in a language that executives care about.
Yeah, yeah. Makes sense. This can be translated into matrix, right? Like instead of reporting on rankings, for example, or random or not random, but I would say marketing niche marketing matrix, we should go and start reporting or focusing on conversions, revenue, and so on. And that makes sense. I mean, that's the purpose of the business at the end of the day. So since now we know our goals, business goals, and we know our matrix, how would you communicate to stakeholders? Like, what's the best, I don't know, tips, for example, or things to make sure that you get buy-in from stakeholders?
Yeah, there are a couple of things. So one is that you want to make sure that whatever you try to communicate, whether it's an ongoing report or your initial strategy, or if it's a plan for next year or an ask for more resources, whatever you do, it has to fit into the strategy of that executive or into the company's strategy. If you go against that strategy, you typically that's typically a big problem, and executives won't support you. So make sure you know what the strategy is and make sure that whatever you propose is in line with that strategy. That's number one. Number two is you want to keep it short, right? Executives are chronically short on time. You need to calculate you need to communicate the TLDR, or really like what is the thing that you want. Is it a problem? Is it an FYI? Is it an opinion? Or is it approval that you need? It's typically one of those, and you want to get to the point as quickly as possible. There's this kind of pyramid structure you can follow when communicating with executives, which really starts with the TLDR, like what is it? In ideally a sentence, something like, I need to hire another person to achieve our goal with X returns. Boom, period. And then from there, you can go deeper into the context and deeper into the why, right? From there, you can have the executive ask questions or see where they are, what information is missing for them to understand your request. But it all has to start with a very short, crisp, to the point ask or a statement. And then lastly, I would say that as we mentioned before, you kind of want to speak the right language, right? So if you go to an executive and say, hey, I want to hire another person so that we can rank more for our top keywords, Not bad, but it could be better, right? It could just simply be to drive another $100,000 in incremental revenue per month or something like that. That's kind of the stuff that executives are looking for, and that really resonates with them.
Okay, that's great, but there's also one more challenge, like how would you navigate like internal politics, right? Like sometimes it's not easy for SEOs to get buy-in or to execute things, and there's a lot of politics going on, especially when you're in-house. That's very common there.
Yeah, sure. Politics can be huge, and so there are different types and levels of politics. There's kind of the shallow side of things where it's much more about charming executives or becoming friends with them. And that ideally doesn't happen. I think it's always a kind of a bad sign when personal relationships trump the performance or trump the data, right? Or trump an objective view on the business. But sometimes it can happen. And then there's the other side of kind of internal politics where, for example, you can use someone the executive trusts to back channel messages, right? And it's actually really weird. But in the last couple of years, I learned that, that sometimes it helps to talk to someone who can then convey a message to that executive because that executive trusted someone. Can actually be a very interesting way to have a clear conversation. Sometimes it's
I
people
like
don't feel
that.
comfortable with it, or sometimes it's they're just for whatever
Having a
reason.
buffer in the middle.
Yeah, like honestly, like a buffer or a mediator, somebody in between. And I hold some. Ideally, that shouldn't happen. You should be able to have crisp and clear conversations, but sometimes it just doesn't happen, right? And then you got to deal with the situation, and somebody to back channel can make a lot of sense. And then lastly, there's also this idea of politics, which I think is actually very favorable, and that's much more about trust with executives. And I think that's fair game. Because reality is that we all form opinions and judgments, good or bad, about other people. And trust is something that builds over time with reliability and good performance. And it makes perfect sense that you might want to give or listen more to someone who you trust, who has consistently proven themselves over time, than somebody who may be completely new and you don't know that person yet, and you don't know what they can do yet. At Shopify, we had this concept of the trust battery, which can charge with keeping your word, being on time, bringing in results or driving impact, and which can decharge or discharge with missing your goals or saying things and then not doing them, or exaggerating, or all these kind of things. So there are different levels of politics, and you kind of want to identify what games, I don't mean that in a judgmental way, but kind of like what type of politics are present at the company, and how can you best play them to your advantage.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I like this battery example. It's really because when we talk about trust, sometimes it can be like a bit ambiguous or not clear what does it mean. But as you said, it means like being realistic or being transparent or real when you set goals. Don't overpromise and underdeliver, and then keeping your words, delivering on time. Yeah, definitely. Because the next question was going to be, how do you build trust in the workplace, right? So that's really, really a good point. Okay, so the next thing I want to know is, why do you think sometimes it's hard for SEOs to work with developers?
Yeah, SEOs and developers can be great friends, but there can also be there can also be tension. And reality is that in most cases, SEOs are reliant on developers, and developers are typically under a lot of under high demand, right? They're typically the bottleneck in a company, and there's typically not enough developers, so they're a resource that's highly fought for. And so the developers are highly rational thinkers. They think very logically in a very structured way. And the problem in SEO is that sometimes you need to take a leap of faith, or sometimes you cannot predict exactly what's going to happen. And that's a tough competition with lots of other channels or stakeholders where the path is very clear. And so as SEOs, we have to slowly charge the trust batteries with developers. We have to, slowly win their trust over with small asks and quickly showing them the results of what that meant. And it also helps to say, hey, I got buy-in from the executives, or everybody's on board, and to show that other people already put trust in SEO, so that you can convince developers to take a bit of a leap of faith, or to prioritize your ask. And at the end of the day, the way that developers typically work is that they have a list of priorities based on impact. And a way to improve our relationship with developers as SEOs is to make sure that we have a logical and sound argument of why they should work on our asks or on our priorities. And that's typically the situation with developers.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, another thing that maybe I wanted to hear your approach about it. How do you assign, once you have this strategy, you have your goals, you got buy-in, how do you assign tasks to execute on the strategy amongst your team?
Yeah, it's a great question. I love that question because it's so simple to just say, hey, go do this, or this is what I want you to do. But there are different types of tasks, or of delegation, better said. Typically the most fruitful type of delegation, but also the one that takes the highest trust, is to delegate an outcome instead of a task. So you basically go to your team or to someone on the team and say, hey, listen, this is the outcome that I want to happen in a certain amount of time. And here are your resources, and these are the parameters that I want you, or the positive, or the constraints that I want you to work within. So an outcome could be like, hey, I want you to write, I don't know, 50 articles over the next 6 months that drive X amount of organic traffic, or maybe a range of organic traffic. And you have, these 2 writers to help you, or maybe some freelancers, and what are your questions? That's a good delegation typically. And it's good because it leaves the individual a lot of agency. They can decide how they achieve that goal or that outcome. Whereas when you say, hey, I want you to do exactly that, here are the 5 things I want you to do, and do them exactly in that type of way, it takes less trust for that, but it also can be a bit more frustrating for that individual because it feels like micromanaging, right? And so I think the challenge as a leader is to find the right level of delegation and give the right level of autonomy, and make sure that the outcome is being met. There are also, you can, on top of the outcome, you can also set constraints like, I want you to report weekly to me, what the progress is and the problems and how things are going. That could be a middle ground. But that's kind of the spectrum that leaders have available when it comes to delegation. And that can also change over time with an individual. So maybe somebody new on the team is being a bit more micromanaged, and then someone who's been on the team for a long time really just needs like a very high level of outcome, because there's already a lot of trust. The thing is that micromanaging has a really bad reputation, but it doesn't always have to be that bad. In fact, I've worked with a lot of people who like to be micromanaged because they want a lot of very specific instruction, and they don't do very well with just providing an outcome. They panic because they don't feel comfortable in achieving that. And then there are other types of individuals who love to have a high level outcome and figure out how to get there. So it's also a little bit about knowing who you work with and what the right level of delegation is that works for them.
Yeah, I like that. I like specifically the last part, knowing what people like and how you can get the best out of them and help them even grow, right? Because if they like micromanagement, it's not ideal for them to grow in the future, like if they're going to take on leadership roles and so on. Okay, so one more thing that also always pops up. Do you think SEOs should be stakeholders for specific website sections, or they should be stakeholder for, the entirety of the website? Because I've seen situations where people say, okay, product pages are owned by product marketing, this owns that, and then SEOs, all you have is the blog, for example. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's a good question because there are companies that handle it in certain ways. I know some very large, some of the largest retailers in the US or in the world, for example, they have SEO teams by site section. or by product category. And then there are other companies, or probably the majority of companies, where SEOs have a bit of a broader scope. I personally think that there are different types of, or different levels of stakeholders. There are, kind of people who are at the table, who are informed. There are people who are consulted, and then there are people who make the decision. And in my mind, if a company takes or wants to take SEO seriously, they need to provide at least a seat at the table for SEOs across the whole website. So, it depends a little bit on how big the SEO team is. If you just have one SEO, or if you have a whole, like 50, or maybe 50 is a bit much, but maybe 20 SEOs, right? That's of course a little bit of a difference. But generally, you want SEOs to at least be informed. Ideally, they make or a part of the decision-making process, because the reality is that the whole website can affect SEO performance, even if the main SEO drivers is just a subset of pages, say landing pages or the blog, right? If most SEO returns come from the blog, there might still be an impact from the quality of the rest of the website, right? So let me give you an example. Say the paid team has 200 landing pages that they use for campaigns. There's barely any content on them. They're very like straight to the point to conversion, and there's not a lot going on. It's duplicate content, maybe even, or some form of duplication. And they have these 200 landing pages, and they're all indexed by Google. Now, those landing pages are primarily for the paid team or for paid campaigns, but they can still have a negative impact on SEO by competing with landing pages that are important for SEO, or by dragging down the overall site quality. So SEO, in my mind, needs a seat at the table when it comes to anything about the website. However, the question is, what is their role and what is their responsibility? And I would say that for some non-SEO relevant things, maybe they're just informed or consulted. And then for the areas that really drive SEO input, they are the decision maker. That's an optimal setup to me.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, one last thing. Okay, what are your thoughts? Okay, not the last thing, actually. What are your thoughts on focusing on SEO in times of recession?
That's a good question. Typically, SEO is a more recession-friendly channel because it's relatively low cost and can be high scale. But the reality is that SEO can also be cut as a channel or a team during a recession, because the returns might not be clear. So the big question really is, how impactful is SEO as a channel in the company? Does it drive 80% of the results? Does it drive 10% of the results? And then what's the sentiment for leadership of SEO? So it goes back to trust, it goes back to driving results and impact. And that will ultimately decide how SEO is kind of being treated in a recession for that company. I think as SEOs, we're of course biased towards SEO, and it's sometimes difficult for us to understand why not every company is investing so much more in SEO. But the reality is that SEO is not always the perfect channel, and similar to brand campaigns, or brand budget, which is typically the first to be cut in a recession, so can SEO, even though there might be a lot of potential. But the question is, how well can you communicate that potential, and how much buy-in do you have from leadership? So it's by no means guaranteed, even though the data shows that companies that invest in brand and in SEO during a recession might buy a huge competitive advantage. We've known this for many recessions, going back to the 70s, that companies that invest and expand in a smart way during a recession, they gain huge competitive advantages during that time, which cannot be made up sometimes by competitors. But it takes a lot of rigor and a lot of smarts and a lot of diligence to invest in the right things and steer the business through a recession. It's typically a very hard challenge. Easy to try to be on this, or to aim for the safe side out of a recession. I can totally empathize with any CEO that says we want to do everything to survive. But there are great examples of companies that invest smartly during a recession and can then gain the market share that other companies lose because they pull back their spend.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense because I've seen some people say, or I think it's like some countries, some politicians would like reduce the marketing budget and that sort of thing. And it's sad because not only it's not gonna be good for the business, it's also gonna hurt the marketing people. So it's like it's a mess. And then they're also gonna be missing out on great opportunity in the recession, as you mentioned. Okay, and I want to ask you about your newsletter, Growth Memo. It's awesome, first of all, and I like that it's the connection between SEO and marketing, because the way you approach problems or the way you discuss things, the way you talk about other channels as well, like TikTok, for example, short videos, and so on. It's like when we're doing SEO, we're so focused on our technical thing, our content, and those Google updates, that sort of thing. These are like the 99% of the discussion in the community. But what I like about your newsletter is like it's really the big picture, which a lot of SEOs miss. So how did you get there?
Thank you, Sarah. I really appreciate your kind words. How did I get there? So actually, the newsletter started as just a list of articles that I read that week. So kind of like a similar format to Alida has with SEO FOMO, or how Nick has with SEO for Lunch, or how Seijo has with TLDR SEO. And then, I really wanted to grow the newsletter and build an audience and build a direct kind of channel to my readers. And I wanted to differentiate. And that's honestly the reason for why I chose that format. So now it's much more of an essay or a comment on a strategic side of SEO and growth, which in my mind are very close together. And it's in part because it's differentiation. Nobody else does that. And another part because it keeps me on my toes. It forces me to stay informed and keep a 360-degree view on the industry and what's changing and what's working. And then on the other hand, I just simply enjoy that a lot. I'm myself. I love these type of newsletters that connect the pieces and that connect the bigger picture. That's something that, like, when I read an article that helps me understand how the big picture comes together, I have like a visceral response in my body. Like I'm like, my God, that I feel so good understanding that right now. And so I'm trying to aim for the same thing. I would love my readers to read that and be like, oh, that makes so much sense. It's like the ending of Ocean's 11, where like, oh my God, that's how they planned it the whole time, and that's how this comes together, right? So I think I'm trying to write my newsletter in a way that people have this kind of Ocean's 11 experience, and it just evolved into that over time. And I'm very lucky, very close to 7,000 readers now, and very lucky to get a lot of data from a lot of SEO platforms and tools, and be able to put the pieces together.
What I feel the reason it's successful is the passion you talk about it. Like, I like it when I talk about passionate people in marketing or in SEO. Like, you really like what you do, and it actually shows. So yeah, can't wait to read more from it. Okay, one last question. Finally, I'll not interrogate you any longer. So who inspires you, or what or who inspires you?
Who inspires me? A lot of people. It might sound cheesy, but my mom and my father inspire me in different ways. My mom is one of the most resilient people I know. It's just mind blowing. My father is incredibly intellectually curious, and my brother is someone who, like when he talks about something, he's so well informed. When he talks about something, you can count on him having done the research, right? Is kind of a typical researcher. And then, there are lots of people, of course, in the SEO space that tremendously inspire me. I mean, I'm probably going to forget 50 people who I wish I would have mentioned afterwards. But of course, Alida is a great inspiration. Lily Ray, Nick Eubanks, Again, 50 other people who I'm forgetting right now, but the SEO community as a whole is just incredible and fantastic. There's some newsletter writers who I love. Of course, Ben Thompson from Stratechery, which was the original inspiration to the growth memo. He's an incredible writer and thinker. Even a Tim Ferriss has been a huge inspiration, or a Noah Kagan, and Andrew Wilkinson, Sam Parr from My First Million in the Hustle, Shan Puri. I would even say people like a Warren Buffett or Charlie Munger, who I also see as these kind of like big piece connectors, had been a huge inspiration to me. So I'm gonna stop there, but there's no shortage of positive influences and inspiration.
That's great, and I hope listeners will check those out as well after they sign up to Growth Memo, obviously.
Thank you.
And thank you so much, Kevin, for this chat. And it's really informative, and I hope it inspires a lot of other people. Actually, the reason I thought this is the best topic, I saw you speak with Alida on SEO strategy before, and it was really interesting. So I felt I want that on my page as well. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Sarah. This has been great. Love the questions and the conversation, and it's been a pleasure to be here with you.